Welcome to Gospel Girl Confessions, where the first whispers of scandal are always sacred. Tonight, you're hearing from the one who was there before the fall, before shame had a name, before love ever had to survive through consequences. Her story's been retold by men for centuries, but now, she's stepping into the confessional herself. So, press play on your heart and lean in, because Eve's got something to say. And trust me, you've never heard the garden like this.
They say I started it all, that I was the root of ruin, the original sin, the whisper in the dark that broke the world open. But let me tell you something, baby. No one ever asks how I felt when the sky cracked open after my yes. No one ever wonders what it's like to be the first woman blamed, the first to fall, and the first to rise anyway. My name is Eve. And before I was painted scandalous in your Sunday school lessons, I was sculpted sacred, by the hands of the divine. He made me with intention, no scraps, no second best. I wasn't plucked from dirt, I was pulled from bone, from the rhythm of another heartbeat. I was a song before I was a sin. Don't forget that. Adam, oh Adam. He was soft in ways he didn't want to be. He was strong where it didn't matter. And we were new. All of it was new. You gotta understand, we didn't know shame. Not yet. We were naked, yeah, but not just in body, in spirit, in thought, in presence. And that kind of naked, it's dangerous in a world that hasn't learned to lie yet. There weren't any mirrors in the garden, but I knew I was beautiful. Not because I stared at myself, but because he called me good. He looked at me and saw himself reflected. So, I walked like I belonged in Eden. Because I did. But even paradise hums with temptation. The serpent didn't come at me with fangs and venom. Nah. He came dressed in curiosity. He spoke like someone who knew things I didn't. Like he'd seen a world just beyond the garden gate. A world where I could be more. He didn't make me eat that fruit. Let me make that clear, once and for all. I chose it. He didn't grab my wrist. Didn't force it between my lips. Didn't chant some dark spell over me. He asked a question. And I, me, the woman who had everything, answered it with a bite. Because I wanted to know. Is that so wrong? But you already know how that story goes, don't you? I wanted to understand the world I was breathing in. I wanted to know what was hidden behind his don't. I wanted to taste wisdom like it was ripe on my tongue. I wasn't trying to destroy humanity. I just wanted more than obedience. I wanted understanding. Suddenly I saw everything, too much, all at once. My body? Strange. His body? Different. We'd always been bare, but now we felt exposed. We tried to cover it with leaves. Can you imagine that? Trying to patch guilt with fig leaves? Like shame could be stitched away? When God came walking through the garden in the cool of the day, we hid. I wish I could explain the sound of that silence. It wasn't just the rustling of leaves. It was the ache of separation. The garden never felt farther than in that moment. Not because he stepped away, but because we did. He asked me what I'd done, and my voice, this voice that once named every creature, that once laughed without weight, it trembled. I said, "The serpent deceived me." And just like that, my name was rewritten, from Eve, the life-bearer, to Eve, the sinner. But here's what they don't teach in most pulpits. He still covered me. Yes, he sent us out. Yes, the garden closed. But before we walked into the wild unknown, he made us garments. From his own hands, from his own mercy. He clothed our shame in grace. That's the part they skip over. That's the part they whisper past when they're too busy blaming the woman. But I know the truth. I was never just a mistake. I was a mother, a mirror, a mover of the story. My hands were dirty, yeah, but they were still holy, still chosen, still part of the plan. And I know what you're thinking, bestie. Why didn't he stop me? Because love without choice isn't love. He gave me a mind, a will, a garden full of yes, and one tree of no. And in that no, I found a longing deeper than I could explain. I was the first to crave more than comfort, the first to wonder what lies outside the boundaries of perfection. Was it a fall? Sure. But it was also a beginning. Because that bite, it broke something open, not just in the world, but in us. And you, sitting there, maybe hiding your own shame, maybe feeling like your bite ruined everything too. Let me tell you something straight from my story. God never left me. He walked me out of Eden, yes, but he walked with me. And when I wept in childbirth, he heard me. When I buried my son, he saw me. When I woke up every morning in a world I broke, he still loved me. So no matter how the world's painted me in scandal, I'll keep telling the truth. I was the first to fall, but also the first to be held. You ever try to start over? While the whole world blames you for how it started? That's what it felt like after the garden. Every step I took outside Eden echoed with the memory of where I came from, and the shame of why I left. The air felt colder, the ground rougher. Even the wind felt different, like it didn't know my name anymore. But Adam, he still looked at me like I was his, even after everything, and I looked at him like he was mine. And maybe that was the real miracle, that two people could still choose love when perfection was gone. But we were learning everything backwards now. Pain came first. Regret. Hunger. Our first prayers were groans in the dirt. Our first worship was just survival. I remember when I first felt life move inside me. It was wild, terrifying, holy. My body, this body I had once hidden with trembling hands, became a vessel, a garden of its own. God had said, "You'll bear children in pain." But he didn't say I wouldn't also bear them in power. Cain was my firstborn. And when I held him in my arms, I whispered, "I have gotten a man from the Lord." That's what I said out loud. But in my spirit, I wondered if maybe this was it. Maybe he was the one who'd fix it all. The promised one. The one who'd crush the serpent's head and bring Eden back to us. But oh, how we misread prophecy in our pain. Then came Abel. Gentler. Quieter. There was something about Abel that reminded me of the breeze before the fall. He was soft like hope, like grace in the form of a boy. I watched them grow. I taught them about the garden, not just the beauty, but the loss. I told them about the voice that used to walk with me. I told them how that voice never stopped speaking, even outside paradise. But bitterness, it brews in the bones when you feel like life has robbed you. Cain looked at Abel with something I knew too well. Envy. That craving for more. That hunger to be enough. It's a poison. And it spreads fast. And then one day, it happened. Abel was gone. Murdered. By my firstborn. And you want to talk about pain? You want to talk about heartbreak? Try holding the bloodied tunic of the son you buried in the same arms that once rocked the one who spilled it. Try facing the voice again, not as a sinner, but now, as a grieving mother. I screamed into the soil, tore at the earth like maybe I could dig deep enough to undo it all. But nothing grew that day. Nothing bloomed. Not even my tears. People remember me as the woman who reached for the fruit, but they forget I also had to reach for forgiveness, not once, but again, and again, and again. And still, he stayed. God didn't strike me down, didn't banish me further, didn't erase me. He marked Cain, not to shame him, but to protect him. Even in wrath, God wrapped his justice in mercy. And I saw that. I saw a glimpse of Eden in that gesture, a flicker of the Father who still covered us, even when we were unworthy. And that's when I began to see what this story really was. Not a curse, but a covenant. Not an ending, but the long, aching beginning of redemption. I wasn't a villain in his eyes. I was the womb he would one day enter through, the broken lineage he would one day heal from within, the woman whose sorrow would one day be mirrored in a mother at the foot of a cross. Do you understand how holy that is? How wild it is to be the first to fail, and still the first to carry promise? I didn't know the name Jesus, but I felt him. In every sunrise after a storm, in every blade of grass that pushed through hard soil, in every breath I took that should have never been mine. So when they call me sinner, I smile, because I know I'm also the seed. I know the serpent didn't win, and I know that even outside Eden, God still walks with women like me. They never told me how loud the silence would be. After Abel died, the world just hushed, like even creation didn't know what to say. The wind didn't blow right. The birds sang softer. It was as if Eden itself mourned with me. There's a kind of grief that doesn't scream. It just sits. It crawls into the spaces between your ribs and steals your breath without making a sound. That's the grief I carried. The kind that doesn't have words. The kind you just survive. Adam and I, we stopped talking for a while. I think we both didn't know how. What do you say when your own flesh and blood shatters the only thing you had left to believe in? We were parents, and suddenly we were also witnesses to the very first death, to the very first grave. And it wasn't just a body we buried. We buried hope that day. And still, life went on. That's the cruel miracle of it all. The sun still rises. The soil still expects you to plant. The world doesn't stop when your heart breaks. It just expects you to keep walking with pieces in your hands. But the thing about brokenness? God's not afraid of it. In fact, he meets us there. I didn't hear him in the wind anymore. I didn't see him walking in the garden. But I felt him, in the ache. In the ache, I learned intimacy. I learned to pray without words, to worship without songs, to trust without answers. That's real faith, bestie. Not the kind you shout on a mountaintop, but the kind you whisper in the dirt. We named our next son Seth. His name means appointed, because even in sorrow, God still gives. And Seth? He carried something different. He wasn't trying to be like Cain. He wasn't haunted by Abel. He just was gentle, steady, healing somehow. And through Seth, I started to see what I couldn't see when I was younger. Redemption takes time. Generations even. I used to think restoration looked like going back to Eden. But now I know. It looks like walking forward with God, even if the path is covered in thorns. I didn't need the garden back. I needed the God who met me outside of it. You see, paradise wasn't the point. Presence was. And he never took that from me. Yes, I lost the garden, but I never lost him. And isn't that the greater miracle? That even after betrayal, after bloodshed, after the ground itself cried out, God still stayed, still covered, still appointed, still breathed. That's why I'm not afraid to confess anymore. Because every scar I carry is a prophecy in reverse, every loss a seed, every tear a river that carved the way for grace. They call me the mother of all living, and I don't take that lightly. I birthed nations. I birthed promise. I birthed pain and praise and legacy. I am not just the woman who sinned. I am the woman who survived. And survival is holy too, especially when you do it with your head up and your faith intact. You know what I learned after the fall? Not all coverings protect you. Some are just shame stitched into silence. Those fig leaves, they didn't keep me warm. They didn't erase the echo of my mistake. They didn't bring back Eden. All they did was remind me that I was trying to hide something holy, because even in my failure, I was still chosen. And let me tell you something the world's been afraid to admit. There's power in a woman who knows what she's done and still stands in the light. I don't flinch anymore when they say my name like it's a curse, because I've made peace with the story. Yes, I took the fruit. Yes, I fell. Yes, I broke what was beautiful, but I also bore what was redemptive. You know what's wild? The same mouth that bit the fruit, later, cried out in worship. The same hands that reached where I shouldn't, also lifted children, built homes, planted seed, wiped tears. I became 1,000 things after the fall, and I stopped apologizing for being all of them. That's the thing about being first. You get blamed for breaking what no one warned you about. No woman had gone before me. No sister to call. No mom to ask. No podcast to binge with 10 ways to resist temptation in paradise. Just me, breath and bone and boldness. And I will not carry the shame of an entire world on my shoulders when my God already carried it on his back. You hear me? You were never meant to hold that weight, sis. God didn't curse me. He cursed the ground. He cursed the serpent. But me, he covered. They always forget to preach that part. They skip past the mercy, past the garments, past the heartbeat of a father who still chose to be near after I walked away. He could have wiped the slate clean, started over, snapped his fingers and created another woman. One more obedient, one less curious, one more cautious. But he didn't. He stayed with me. The first woman. The one who fell. The one who bled. The one who built. The one who birthed nations from pain. That's the kind of God I walk with. The kind who doesn't just sit on a throne, but kneels in the dirt beside you and says, I'm still here. And if he's still here, then I am too. Alive. Accounted for. Tear-streaked and faithful. Unashamed and unhidden. And that, baby girl, is what real redemption looks like. Let me tell you something I've come to understand. Healing doesn't come in a moment. It comes in generations. When I first held Seth, I didn't just hold a child. I held a thread, a lifeline, a piece of promise. And even though I'd walked through shame, through heartbreak, through blood in the soil and silence in the sky, I still believed. That belief didn't look like fire falling from heaven. It looked like lullabies in the night, like nursing wounds and wiping muddy feet, like making dinner over smoke and stone while whispering, God is still good. Because faith doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just breathes. And every breath I took after the garden was borrowed grace. You think you've made mistakes? Baby, I made history. And yet, God let me live it. Let me walk it. Let me raise kings and fugitives, prophets and wanderers. Let me feel it all, and still find him in the middle of it. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. My story wasn't the ending. It was the entry point. The beginning of a redemption that would stretch through centuries, through bloodlines, through broken women and wild faith, through wombs once barren and prayers once bitter, through women forgotten by men, but never by God. Women like me. You want to know what's wild, bestie? God didn't just allow me to stay in the story. He let me start it. He didn't erase me to protect his image. He highlighted me to prove his mercy. The first sin came through a woman. But so did the Savior. Isn't that something? He could have entered the world through fire, thunder, royalty. But instead, he came the way I birthed mine, through groans, through blood, through pain, through a woman. As if to say, Eve, I haven't forgotten you. As if to whisper across the ages, you didn't ruin it, you helped begin it. That's why I don't hide anymore. I walk uncovered now, not because I'm proud of what I did, but because I'm no longer ashamed of who I became. They can tell my story however they want. But when I tell it, it sounds like survival, like sovereignty, like a God who stayed. And you, listening to me now, maybe your garden's gone. Maybe your innocence is a story you tell in past tense. Maybe you've tasted the fruit and now you're choking on the shame. But let me be the first to tell you, you're still his. And no amount of failure, no depth of fall, no serpent's whisper can change that. You know what's funny? For all the stories told about me, no one ever asked me how I healed. They talk about how I broke it. They preach about how I fell. They study the fruit, the snake, the shame. But they skip the restoration. Like I didn't get back up. Like I didn't learn how to laugh again. How to raise boys again. How to plant gardens with blistered hands and still whisper, "This is good." But I did, because I didn't stay in the fall. I fell, yes, but I rose differently. Not softer, not smaller, not quieter, but wiser, wilder, full of worship. Because you don't walk out of Eden and survive all this without growing something holy in your bones. I stopped longing for the gates to reopen. They didn't need to. God met me out here. And the truth is, the longer I walked with him outside the garden, the more I began to see the garden was never the prize. His presence was. And presence follows pain like flowers follow rain. So I kept walking. I raised my children under a different sky. I taught them to pray from the ground up. I taught them that worship didn't need temples. It only needed truth. And I held my daughters tight, whispered over them in the dark. You are not defined by what they say I was. You are not a curse. You are not shame. You are not the sin of your mother's mother's mother. You are loved. You are legacy. You are light in motion. And if the world says otherwise, then let the world choke on the lies it swallowed whole for centuries. Because I'm done being the villain in a story that God already redeemed. I was never the end. I was the entrance. And that's why I keep speaking now. That's why this confession matters. Because there are still women hiding in fig leaves. Still daughters burying their worth. Still little girls being taught that curiosity is a curse. But not anymore. Not on my watch. If I have to be the first to speak it out loud again, then so be it. I was the first to fall. But baby, I was also the first to get back up. And from that moment on, I've been walking toward the promise, covered in grace, held in mercy, named not by shame, but by the one who never left me.
You've just heard the confession of Eve, the first woman, the first to be blamed, and the first to be held. She didn't just fall, she fought. And maybe, just maybe, her story isn't so far from yours. Maybe you've tasted regret. Maybe you've been painted wrong. Maybe you've walked away from your own garden, wondering if God still walks with women like you. Tonight, Eve answered that. With every broken piece she carried, she told the truth. That mercy still finds us. That God still covers us. That even in the wild, even after the fall, we are still known. Until next time, this has been Gospel Girl Confessions. One voice, one woman, one truth at a time. And remember, even if you were the first to fall, you can still be the first to rise.